Let's do our stock up, stock down segment, Joshua. I want to start with BYU. I know you're high on them. This game was crazy. I don't know if anyone saw BYU just completely trashing Kansas State. Provo at night, though. It's a weird place to play. That was an after dark game. And BYU does this. They have talent. They have athletes. They have older players. We all know that a lot of them go on their Mormon missions. They're led by a Jewish quarterback. They're just like a fascinating team to me. And they come up with a huge win in Big 12 play against K-State. And is still considered a Big 12 favorite.
Yeah, from the BYU side, you're right about the construction of the team and the way that they played. And this was a pure after dark game, by the way, because you look at some of the stats and it's hard to make sense of them. If you look at Kansas State, they were good on third downs. They ran more offensive plays. Like they were able to move the ball. I believe they outgained BYU, but you had turnovers in there, which is like a hallmark of after dark. You had a huge special teams play, which is a hallmark of after dark, and BYU was able to get the win. Now, there is a flip side of this, and I know this is a BYU stock up, but Avery Johnson, for all of the conversation about what he is as a quarterback and how good he is, he needs to become a better passer. He's a great dual threat. The legs are phenomenal. Throwing the football, it has not been great. Like the passing totals haven't been remarkable. And then you get into a game with BYU where you're turning the football over. But BYU caused the turnovers. They play really good defense, one of the best in the country. My arrow is definitely pointing up on them.
Yeah, and they were picked really low to finish in the Big 12. But it's a good reminder. Can't count them out. Cosmo the Cougar, that is a crazy mascot. Joshua hates mascots, but
I do.
He also has some like kind of voodoo magic in there as well when they play.
There's one mascot I don't hate that we're going to talk about a little bit later on this show, though.
Ooh, that's a good tease. All right, stock up. How about Iowa and Kaleb Johnson? When was the last time we put an Iowa offensive category or offensive player in a stock up category?
He deserves it. Kaleb Johnson is phenomenal. He's got a lot of burst to his game. He's not a super wiggly running back, but when he finds a seam, he can run away from people. He's become more physical in his game. I wouldn't say physicality is like his number one attribute, but he's certainly shown more of that. And Iowa needs him to play the way that he's been playing. Because guess what? Iowa and Michigan, they're like cousins right now. They ain't throwing the football very well. But if you can't stop the run game, they're going to be right there. And a couple of teams that also play really good defense. So Kaleb Johnson is probably their most important player right now. And nationally, when we start talking about awards and we start talking about hype, his name is going to start creeping into that conversation if he can keep up the pace he's on right now.
Yeah, I was going to put that out there. 685 rushing yards so far this season, leads the entire country. I mean, Ashton Jeanty, we're going to talk about him. We talk a little Heisman later in the show, but like that's his peer right now in the way that he is running the ball and touchdowns. And if you have a really reliable run game for Iowa, like we've talked about this and we saw it on display against Minnesota in the second half, but they don't need to be like a top 10 offense in the country. They just need to be more middle of the pack. And if they can sustain drives by running the ball effectively, that shortens the game. And then your defense and your special teams can take over. It's perfect complementary football. And that's what Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator, is trying to do. They're still Iowa. They're just doing it better this year.
No doubt. I think you're spot on with that analysis.
All right. Last team for stock up is a team that we definitely had for stock down relatively recently. And that is Clemson. The Tigers have basically been on a tear since we saw them get blown out by Georgia in the opener. Feels like Dabo Swinney is like, hey, you guys wrote us off to your own peril. Cade Klubnik's been really good. They've been really good offensively. They crushed NC State, who is not a very good football team. We saw Tennessee crush them as well. But they did it to App State too. I feel like the reason I'm putting them in stock up is not just because they put up flashy numbers, but I think they're good enough to contend in the ACC. I think they're good enough to contend for a CFP at-large spot. I just think a lot of people wrote them off, including us, as like Georgia level. They're not there.
Yeah. No, they're not there. But I also did have them preseason winning the ACC. And Miami has obviously shown up, and so that's going to be a great race there. But I agree with you. Like, they should be in play to win that conference. And if they're in play to win the conference, certainly they'll be in play to be an at-large in the college football playoff race. Clemson they did it last year. They're doing it to us right now. There were guys who I played with that had to go out in the game of football and get hit really hard before they were ready to play, right? Like they just had to feel that sting before they could be themselves. And Clemson is a program that I guess has to feel the sting. They had to feel it last year, right? We had Tyler from Spartanburg. Okay, Tyler. Okay, and then they started playing some good football, and now they go get their butt kicked by Georgia, and everybody's like, oh, Dabo is behind, which he still is, regardless of how this goes. Dabo is still behind the times, and Clemson is not a power program. That might still be a question for us. They could be a really good program by the end of the year, so they deserve to be in stock up. And for all the folks, including us, who wrote them off, like, we got to wait and see this thing play out.
Yes, completely true. And again, there's going to be at-large teams that make the playoff that have flawed resumes or are flawed teams. So we don't have to write everybody off immediately. And we did say, hey, maybe this result is something we're going to overreact to. Maybe it's more about Georgia than it is about Clemson, yes. And yet we still did it anyway. So,
but this is college football. We're supposed to overreact. We have to.
It's true. And we also only get a very small amount of sample sizes.